For everyone who has made it to this point of the video, congratulations, because we have officially finished the basic Arabic alphabet. And now this is already a very, very large feat, and it's going to take a lot of repetitiveness, a lot of practice, a lot of just study, a lot of looking at text, reading text, trying to listen to text. The best thing you can do is watch things that are in Arabic, watch cartoons that are either dubbed in Arabic or created in Arabic. But to round out this video for the Arabic alphabet, I'm going to move on to a couple perhaps more advanced but very relevant issues. For instance, I'm going to discuss the modified letters now. I'm not going to get too in-depth in terms of what these different symbols are, but the different modified letters that you're going to want to know are the following. The following themselves are not individual letters, but rather there are different contextual variants of some of the Arabic letters. For instance, we have Alif Mada, which is written the same in its isolated and initial form, and it's also written the same in its medial and final form. The next letter is Ta Marbuta. This is a very, very common modified letter that you would probably most likely see at the end of a word. Oftentimes if you see a Ta Marbuta, it's indicating that a particular noun is feminine, but this is not always the case. But the Ta Marbuta looks very similar to the Ha, which we discussed earlier, except it has two dots on top of the letter. Finally, we have Alif Maksura, which is the way that Alif would be written, either isolated or at the end. There are many words where you'll see Alif Maksura. It's not as common as perhaps the other. It's not as common, definitely not as common as Ta Marbuta. I would say it's relatively as common perhaps as Alif Mada, but you're not going to see it all the time. But you should be aware that if you see a Ya type symbol, yet there's no dots on it, that this isn't a typo. It is actually just Alif Maksura at the end of a sentence, or the end of a word. Okay, let's move on to the topic of gemination. Gemination is the doubling of a consonant. Instead of writing the letter twice, as one would do in English, Arabic places a sign that looks like a small W, called shadda, above it. Now shadda is a very good term to become familiar with in terms of diacritical signs. The name for the whole matrix of diacritical signs is known as harakat. Harakat literally means motions and are the short vowel marks. At this point, now that we've just finished the alphabet, I would love to take the word harakat, as seen at the upper left-hand portion of the screen, and deconstruct this word letter by letter, just to do a little bit of practice in terms of our isolated, initial, medial, and final phase of each of the letters. The furthest to the right is the emphatic letter Ha. Do you recognize it? This isn't necessarily the way that you would write it if you were handwriting, but this is the way that you would see it written in perhaps like a printed script, or in like a book, or on the news, or any other type of medium where it's actually just being typed. And then immediately to the left of the Ha, we see the Ra. And we know that Ra is one of the 6 non-connectors, which is why it doesn't connect, and there's a small space in between the Ra and the next letter. However, you can see how the Ra connects to the Ha. Next, as we move to the left, there is the Kaf. Kaf in its initial form. Now, remember that initial doesn't necessarily mean at the beginning of a word. It more so means at the beginning of a progression. So this is the initial form of the Kaf, and we see the Kaf transitions into an Alif. Alif itself being a non-connector, there is again another break in the word, and since there's only one letter left, which is the letter Ta, the word is finished out with Ta in its isolated state. Now we're going to move on to nunation. Now this is very common for people who are just starting with Arabic, and that you would see these because they're sort of the additional symbols that I was talking about, the additional markings that perhaps wouldn't be in like a newspaper or in more formal text. There are basically 3 symbols that you're going to see, and I'm making these 3 symbols known right now. The different symbols may represent, in terms of transliteration, the sound un, the sound in, or the sound an, with a tiny bit of variation depending on the dialect, depending on the region, and depending on the word itself. The Arabic term for nunation is tanween, is the addition of a final n to a noun or adjective. The vowel before it indicates grammatical case. In written Arabic, nunation is indicated by doubling the vowel diacritic at the end of the word. There are 3 of these vowel diacritics, and the signs indicate the endings un, which is the nominative case, an, which is the accusative, and in, which is the genitive. If you're like really getting into the language and studying it, in terms of all aspects, try to keep in mind the nominative, accusative, and genitive state. Nunation becomes a tricky topic because nunation is used only in formal Arabic. In other words, this nunation is absent in everyday spoken Arabic. What this means is when you're hearing people communicate, they may not include these like nunation at the end of a word. For instance, sayyara is car. So perhaps sayyaratun. The un sound that you hear at the end is, although sayyara, it ends with a ta marbuta sound, which we're going to discuss later, but the reason it sounds like sayyaratun is that when you're going past a ta marbuta and there's something beyond it, you're going to make a ta sound, which is kind of connecting it to the tanween that we were discussing. So it's going to sound like sayyaratun. Perhaps this isn't the best example because I chose a feminine noun. Okay, here is a masculine noun, and it's bab, which means door. Babun. Babun. So you hear the nunation, the babun. Okay, moving on. Okay, let's discuss vowels for a moment, because this is kind of a tricky subject, but once you have it down, it's actually very simple to understand. When writing Arabic, long vowels are usually written, but short ones are usually omitted. So the reader must be familiar with the language to understand the missing vowels, which I have discussed earlier in terms of the grammar, or in terms of the vocabulary. You won't know exactly what a word means unless you're already familiar with it, because these markings have been left out. An Arabic sentence can have a completely different meaning by a subtle change of the vowels. This is why in an important text, such as the Quran, the vowels are mandated. Short vowels. Vowels are indicated by diacritical marks placed above or below the letters. In the Arabic handwriting of everyday use, in general publications and on street signs, short vowels are typically not written. On the other hand, copies of the Quran cannot be endorsed by the religious institutes that review them unless the diacritics are included. It is also generally preferred and customary that they be included whenever the Quran is cited in print. Children's books, elementary school texts, the Arabic language grammars in general will include diacritics to some degree. These are known as vocalized texts. Written Arabic cannot be considered truly complete without the notation of its short vowels, which are essential to it. They convey information not coded in any other way. Like dotted letters, diacritical marks were a later addition to the writing system. For instance, in classical Arabic, there were not these diacritical marks, which today make understanding classical Arabic very, very difficult. Short vowels can be included in cases where word ambiguity could not easily be resolved from context alone, or simply wherever they might be considered aesthetically pleasing. Short vowels may be written with diacritics placed above or below the consonant that precedes them in the syllable, which, again, are called harakat. All Arabic vowels, long and short, follow a consonant. Here are the following short vowels that you will need to know. These are very important and you will see them in nearly every word. The first one is fatha, which is basically a small diagonal line that you're going to find above words. The transliteration for that would just be an A, in that it's indicating a short vowel A sound. The next short vowel is the damma, which is indicated by a little what I think looks sort of like a ribbon. It's just like a very, very small loop that you will also find above words. The third short vowel is called kasra. It's going to be written underneath the word in almost all cases, while there is one exception which I will be discussing later. The transliteration for kasra is going to be an E or an I sound. Let's take a look at some examples. As you will see, I have three letters that are ba. The first ba has a fatha, the second ba has a kasra, and the third ba has a damma. The first would be pronounced ba, the second one bi, the third one bu, depending on the different short vowel notations.